Now, as I said at the start of the show, the Conservative Party has been accused of rushing its leadership election and, in doing so, signing its own death certificate. Writing in the Sun newspaper this week, columnist Rod Liddle claimed that in their haste to replace Boris Johnson, the Conservatives have been left with two candidates that will struggle to set anyone's blood racing and keep the so-called red wall seats won by Boris Johnson in 2019. So is he right? Well, joining me now to discuss is the political commentator Dominique Samuels, the associate editor himself of The Spectator, Rod Liddle, and the political commentator Sophie Corcoran. Rod, could you just elaborate, give us a little bit more detail about what you meant when you said, look, I think the Conservatives have signed their own death warrant here, or certificate even?
Yeah, I think there's a number of problems. Firstly, it was far too rapid a process, so that it was very difficult either for MPs or indeed for the public or for Conservative Party members to find out what each of the candidates actually stand for. And that was made very plain by the gradual dawning, and we should have had weeks to discuss this, that Penny Mordaunt was woker than a snowy owl at 3 o'clock in the morning, and obviously not suited to run a party called the Conservative Party. Similarly, it didn't give enough time for Kenny Badenoch, or Badenoch, however you wish to pronounce it, to push her case and to get her views across in a way which would have, I think, shown the party that she could have been a very, very good leader indeed. She was the only one, perhaps along with Tom Tugendhat, who looked to take the party forward and who I think could have had an effect on the voting public. And certainly, from the story which you were talking about before on LGBTQI and Stonewall, she would have been bang on the money with that. Mm-hmm. The other problem is that we now have Liz Truss and Rishi. And what will happen, almost certainly, is that Rishi Sunak, I think, would have stood a much better chance of winning a general election, but he won't get a chance to do so because Liz Truss will win amongst Conservative Party members who want someone from the right of the party, whereas Rishi is probably more seen as being in the centre and possibly even Liberal. So I think Rishi would have stood a better chance of winning the election, but even then he wouldn't have won the election because there were so many people, Conservative voters, and people who aren't particularly fond of the Conservative Party, who voted Tory in 2019 for Boris Johnson and are furious at the way in which Boris Johnson was treated. And now I have to say, I think Boris should have gone because of the way he mishandled a whole bunch of events. But nonetheless, there are a number of people, a large number of people, who voted Tory, not because they like the Tories, but because they like Boris Johnson. So I think neither of the candidates has quite what it takes to win the next election. And I think that's probably bad news for the country, even though I'm not a Tory myself.